Hey everybody, this is First Warn Storm Team Chief Meteorologist Brad Panovich with an update on a cold, chilly Tuesday that's shaping up. After a little bit of sunshine yesterday, it kind of got a little bit milder. Temperatures got into the upper 50s, the warmest we've been since last Thursday. Today, we're kind of back to the winter weather pattern where it's cold, but not wintry yet. We're going to get to the wintry part of my forecast in a second. But one thing, if you're new to this area that you've got to become familiar with, and if you're an old hat to this, you know what I'm talking about. It's the Carolina Wedge. This is cold air damming that we're talking about here. And what this is, if you're not familiar with it, is I'm going to turn the temperatures off here. As you see these high pressures over the northeast, this happens quite a bit in the wintertime. We get a high pressure, a very cold high that sets up either over eastern Canada, New England, sometimes over the mid-Atlantic, depending on the position. The clockwise flow around the surface high pushes really cold air down the eastern side of the mountains. And because you have the Blue Ridge Mountains, which are about, the average height of the Blue Ridge is between 4,000 to 6,000 feet in elevation, it traps that cold, heavy, dense air east of the mountains. Once that cold air gets entrenched, it kind of sticks around, and then we end up getting these little low pressure systems or fronts to the south that push moisture up and over this cold air. And this is kind of your setup for ice in the winter. Now, it's not always ice. Sometimes it's a miserable cold rain. Sometimes it's a drizzly, kind of just miserable day. But this is why we get precipitation type issues in the winter, depending on the position of the high, how cold that air is, how warm the air is pushing over it. You can get everything. And in this case today, this is just a cold, miserable rain that's setting up. I'll turn the temperatures back on. You can see the high. It's kind of over Baltimore this morning. Not a really big deal, but this is kind of setting up this kind of a drizzly, misty day that we're going to see. Let me turn the satellite on here real quickly, and you'll see the satellite imagery shows pretty thick clouds, and temperatures around Charlotte are in the upper 40s. But with moisture moving in from the south, overriding this relatively cold, dry air at the surface, we're going to see a pretty chilly day all in all. And then we're going to see this Arctic front, which is up here to the northwest. You see that front? Boy, that is the real deal, folks. Behind it, you could see the air mass. Much colder temperatures on the backside of this, below zero up here in parts of the upper Midwest and parts of the Dakotas, all the way down into Nebraska, Kansas, and even northern Oklahoma. So this is the Arctic front, and this is the front that's heading our way really late tomorrow into Thursday. And this cold air is going to be pushing east and southeast as we go into the weekend. Now, that leads us to the potential setup for some wintry weather on Saturday morning. It's not really going to be Friday. I know yesterday I posted Friday night and Saturday. There's a chance it could have been late Friday, but this is not going to be a Friday issue by any stretch of the imagination. We're talking mainly about Saturday morning into the first half of the day. So let's go to the setup. Here is our map today based on the model guidance. You can see our Arctic front is back in here. Just for perspective, it's right in here. There's our Arctic front pushing across the country. Here's the rain and the crummy weather we're going to have today. Once the Arctic front gets here, probably sometime tomorrow, it will produce a little bit of snow in the North Carolina mountains. You can see as the Arctic air spills in, the big Arctic high, we see a little bit of snow lining up in the southern Appalachians. So pretty good shot of northwest flow snow from Virginia, West Virginia, all the way down here into North Carolina. So pretty good setup. But there's the heart of the Arctic high, and this is key. This is where the high is up here. And actually, I should change this to blue, so we'll do that so it's easy. So this is the Arctic high up here. It's going to be moving east, and guess where it's going? That position I just talked about, the wedge position. So watch as I put these maps into motion here as we go through late tomorrow, Thursday, and then into Friday. Look at where the high starts to go. It starts pushing into Ohio Valley, and then it starts to shift to the east. And if you're looking for the position of the high, it's where these low, the isobars, we call it, the lines are closing off. So this is going into late Friday, and you can see the high right there. And you can tell the wedge is building because you see how these lines are bending back this way. This means cold air is getting pushed down the eastern side of the mountains. So you see the high setting up for Friday. And we'll go into Friday afternoon, Friday night, and then there you go. That's your classic position for cold air damming. Arctic high right there, pushing cold air down. But the moisture's still back here and down here, so we don't have the moisture yet. So it's cold. Friday, the highs struggling to get above freezing for a high temperature. But as we go into Friday night and early Saturday, here comes the moisture. And a couple things to notice. The moisture is incredibly light, But then we go into Saturday morning. This is early Saturday. You can see we got a little bit of a wintry mix developing, likely ice. This is not going to be snow, though it could start as snow in the mountains. This would change to sleet or freezing rain pretty quickly, and really light stuff. The reason it's light, the high starts to push offshore. If it was going to stay all ice, it would stay here and keep pumping down the cold air. But as the high shifts off to the east like this, the flow around the high starts becoming kind of more out of the east, and this brings in warmer air, not only from the Atlantic, but from the Gulf of Mexico. And I say warm, this is relative to freezing. It's still going to be cold. Temperatures upper 30s if we're lucky. But as that high pushes away, at the same time the moisture comes in, it starts to warm up. But there's certainly going to be a brief period of freezing, drizzle, mist, or even light freezing rain early. This is 7 a.m. Saturday morning. And you could see a little bit of ice all the way down into Greenville, the upstate. But watch what happens. By about lunchtime, boom, it starts to move out. And then by the time we get to 1 o'clock in the afternoon, you're talking about just all rain. So it just turns to rain. So let's back it up again. Late Friday night, the cold air is established. This is 2 o'clock in the morning, Saturday morning. Then we get up Saturday, 5 a.m. We've got some mist, freezing drizzle mist. It's still around by 7 a.m. and then by about 10, it starts to move out, and then it's long gone. So this is really going to be what we call a nuisance event. If you're up early, there certainly could be some slick railings, maybe slick walks, but overall, I don't think this is going to be a big deal. If we see any type of winter weather advisories, watch warnings, it's likely going to be a freezing drizzle advisory, maybe a winter weather advisory at best. But the emphasis here is incredibly light amounts of ice before it moves out, because you can see there's another big storm system coming in from the west, and it warms up really rapidly. We actually could see highs on Sunday go up into the low 60s as this another Arctic front comes down. This Arctic front, though, looks like it's going to have a tough time getting here, but it will maybe bring some strong, maybe some severe thunderstorms, which is something to keep an eye on. You see the line of storms, but look at the cold air behind it and the snow. It will cool back down next week behind this front, but not as dramatic, I think, as the cold air that's coming the next couple of days. You can see the cold air and snow moves back to the mountains. So, I mean, that's a pretty interesting weekend. We could go from highs in the 30s to highs in the 60s in about a 36 to 48 hour period. But again, this is Saturday morning. The threat minimal right now, but it's something to keep an eye on, especially if you're traveling really early on Saturday morning. I think the potential for freezing drizzle and mist is there, still on the low end. I'm going to stick pretty close to what I had earlier. To this map, I think the chances of seeing significant icing about 10% and maybe as high as 30% in the mountains. Now, I may update this later today as I'm at work, but this is the map I'll keep updating as we get closer to Saturday morning for that potential icy event. It's going to be a nuisance event at best, but if you're traveling, it's something you need to know about. Okay, sorry for the longest video I probably posted in a while, but I wanted to get all that in and talk about those impacts. Hope you're having a great Tuesday, and I'll keep things up to date online. Tell your friends to follow me on Facebook if they're not already. They'll have a heads up on these events long before they happen. I'll see you today at 4 on NBC Charlotte.